started, I just want to take a moment and acknowledge how incredible the work is in the States and how honored I am to be up on the stage and how grateful I am to hear all these stories and to be present with all of you for what I think is one of the most impactful and interesting meetings of the year. And I just think it's amazing listening to these stories and listening to the work that's happening. So I'm Brandie Balken, and I'm from Equality Utah. And we had a really interesting year this last year. So before I get started with my slides, I just want to make one point very, very clear. 80% of elected officials in the state of Utah are Republicans. 80%. So let's begin. So prior to December 20th, 2013, this was basically the state of Utah. There we go. We had no statewide enumerated protections. 18 cities and counties had passed non-discrimination ordinances inclusive of gender identity and expression. We had a senior Republican sponsor of our bill for the first time. And we were poised, we were ready. We were running a statewide campaign. We were geared up, we had secured the funding, we had done all the fundraising. We were ready to rock and roll. We had a campaign manager. I mean, we were ready to go. You also probably remember that Utah had this kind of what they call a rogue marriage case that kind of came out of nowhere. No one thought anything was going to happen with it. We actually weren't even expecting a ruling until sometime in January. And our session, like some of your sessions, run from January to March. So we had campaign staff. We had like 20 contracted employees, people who had worked generally on marriage campaigns, but were flying into the state of Utah to work with us on our not marriage campaign, on our non-discrimination campaign. We were ready to go. And then marriage came to Utah. Like, wow. I think the entire country was thinking, what the hell just happened? We were thinking, what the hell just happened? Again, we were not expecting the ruling to come until January, and on December 20th, it came down at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and literally in a 17-day period, over 1,300 people had gotten married across the state of Utah. It was insane. And great, and totally insane, right? And then, pretty much, all hell broke loose in the state of Utah. So we had 19, 20, 25 people who were ready to roll our non-discrimination campaign. That was our top priority, has been our top priority, will continue to be our top priority in the state of Utah. After the marriage decision came down, we had 7 anti-LGBT bills announced to come up in the upcoming session. There was a complete attack on our transgender community, and today that still continues. And I'm not just talking about an ideological attack, I'm talking about actual physical attacks are happening in our state really all the time. There's been intense backlash based on the marriage decision in our state. We had these 1,300 couples who'd been married. They were completely disacknowledged. We had adoptions being stopped, even though judges were ruling that these adoptions were legal. And we had this really interesting sort of narrative coming out of our conservative opponents that were conflating every bit of work into one big homosexual agenda ball, which is also not correct, right? Because we're an LGBT movement, so I thought that was kind of odd, that there was this conflation of gender identity and bathroom panic and public accommodations and non-discrimination, and it was just this great big scare tactic coming down at us, right? Utah's had an interesting year. I don't know. Do you sense that? It's been interesting. And then, right before the legislative session, so our legislative session starts the last week of January. 1 week into the session, the AG, the outside counsel that had been hired to defend our marriage ban, all legislative leadership from the GOP, so our Republican caucus, got together in a closed-door meeting and they shut us down. They basically said, we're not going to hear your bill. We're not going to hear anything about your homosexual agenda. We're going to take a time out. So here we were with 20 plus staffers, in addition to our long-term staffers, ready to run a quality and quantity campaign in the state of Utah to pass non-discrimination. And basically legislative leadership just said, we're not hearing it. It's not going to move. You're not going to talk about it. You're not going to do it. So we had to decide what we were going to do next. So we decided to do what anyone would do. We were going to pivot. We were going to make the best of what we had. We were going to utilize the resources that we had to get whatever gain we could get. So we decided to move our efforts from a legislative campaign into a delegate campaign, basically. So Utah is an archaic and odd state in some ways. our elected officials get on the ballot based on what delegates decide, not the population, but delegates. So we decided we were going to run a very concerted effort to bring forward self-identified Republicans who were also in favor of equality and push them into the delegate process. So here we are, setting up at the GOP convention. Our campaign was called Utahns for Freedom, which has a nice ring to it, I think, because who doesn't like freedom, right? Freedom's good for everybody. So what did we gain from doing this piece? We expanded our list hugely of conservative-leaning folks, and again, 80% of elected officials in Utah, Republican. We grew awareness about non-discrimination. We were effectively able to transition the narrative that this isn't a progressive issue, it isn't a Democratic issue, this is an issue for Republicans as well. We mainstreamed non-discrimination in that way. We engaged over 1,000 LGBT-affirming Republicans in the delegate process. We replaced hundreds of bad delegates with good delegates, and I'm talking super delegates. I'm talking about super delegates who are willing to bring the conversation into the room every time, at every town hall, at every caucus meeting, because here's what I think we all know. People say things when we're in the room, but they say very different things when we're not in the room. And getting Republican delegates who have Republican credibility to talk about our issues, our lives, our people, completely changes the narrative. So yeah, come out and visit in Utah. We could use folks like you. Thanks.